Are we gonna feed our chicken like in the other video?
God, you saw that video?
Saad, I've seen all your videos.
This is Sami Seif. Welcome. He's the newest composer in New York. Brand new.
Thank you for welcome.
Yeah,
Appreciate
of course.
it.
Thanks for
having
coming.
me.
Of course, for coming here. Sami just started at the CUNY Graduate Center, his PhD. It's a PhD, right? It's not a DMA, in music composition.
Yeah.
Yeah. And where were you before that?
I was at the Cleveland Institute of Music.
Cool, cool. And it was just 4-year degree, or you went on and did something else after that?
I did 1 year of graduate studies, but I technically didn't graduate because it was just 1 year.
Yeah.
I didn't want to take a gap year, you know?
Yeah.
So I did 1 year of extra studies, but I only have an undergrad degree.
Yeah. What made you want to come to New York to study music composition?
You did.
Me?
That was your advice, right? Yeah, and of course the graduate center, of course, and the faculty, and the fact that it was in New York, and
Yeah.
just the new music scene here, and the music scene in general, and just the culture of the city, like the cultural wealth.
You didn't think that you found any of that at Cleveland?
I found a great music scene. I found actually a small but very solid new music scene. It's not as cosmopolitan of a city, which is good in its own way because it's a very relaxed place. Like you can really focus on your work there. So I feel like at this point it's just time for something else. You know, staying in one place for too long.
Yeah. I mean, I felt like that way too when I was at USC. Even in LA, I felt like almost that I was away from where all the action was going on. Even though I was in LA, and you probably felt the same way while you were in Cleveland. So, and I feel like a lot of composers end up doing that. Like at some point they're going to find themselves in New York.
Maybe, I guess so. I mean, I honestly would feel like I used my time in Cleveland well.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate. I got to work with some amazing people. So I was very happy to be there. It's just, you know, changing schools is a thing you should do, and changing, you know, perspectives and things. I haven't been since high school, I haven't been anywhere for too long because I've traveled through my life, actually. I was kind of born outside my country. I was born outside my country. I lived outside my country for my whole life. Moved around. I was in Abu Dhabi for most of my life. Then I went to Toronto. Then I went to Cleveland, and now I'm in New York.
So you're in Abu Dhabi most of your life. You are Lebanese, right? Just like, well, I'm half Lebanese. I wouldn't say I'm full Lebanese, but you're a full Lebanese, right? Full Lebanese. Both parents from Lebanon?
Yeah, and that's my only citizenship.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, your only citizenship is from Lebanon?
Exactly, yeah.
Even though when you were in Canada, you didn't have citizenship at all?
Well, I have what they call a permanent resident card.
Yeah.
Which is basically their version of a green card. But I'm not living there, so
yeah,
kind of have to see what I can do with my status there.
Yeah.
So I'm only a Lebanese citizen, yeah.
So far, which place have you liked being the most between Abu Dhabi, between Canada, and between the U.S.? Where would you see, if you got to choose where you wanted to stay long term? Forget the personal stuff, because family could be wherever it may. That's how I am. My family is in, you know, LA. So, but for the career music stuff, I mean, I'm assuming it's here in the U.S., right?
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. But Toronto has a great music scene too.
It does have a very strong music scene. It is a different culture though around new music. Toronto is, I got the sense, like more Europe influenced than somewhere like New York. I felt like my general impression, that is. I feel like in Canada though, like the main is probably like around Montreal more than Toronto. There's more of a new music culture, I get the sense, in Montreal, although I haven't been there.
Yeah. I mean, at Columbia, where I'm doing my PhD, or DMA, I don't know, there's a big fight whether it's people say they have a PhD, people say they have a DMA. Anyway, but at Columbia, there's a big funnel from Montreal. Like a lot of composers come from Montreal, a lot of Canadian composers, but especially from Montreal, coming into our program at Columbia. So it's interesting to see that, because I haven't visited Montreal. I've only been to Toronto a few times. So I don't really understand what the divide is between those two scenes in Canada. But I just find it super interesting because that goes on in the US too. Like there's different camps of thought, you know, between the wind band camp, the choral camp of thought. Then even in Manhattan, there's like the uptown, downtown divide going on. So to me, it's just funny to see all these it's all this tension, because I feel like it's almost like just it's there on purpose just to have some kind of discourse.
Oh, there's definitely.
I don't know what you think, but
oh yeah, no, there's definitely a divide between Toronto and Montreal. I get the sense of that. It's mainly between like also McGill and U of T.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been to U of T, but I haven't been to McGill yet. Hopefully soon.
Yeah, well, I get the sense that McGill has much more of a Europe influence and French influence, especially like Philippe Leroux teaches there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just the sort of, shall we say, post-spectral IRCAM influence over there is much bigger than it is in Toronto.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's the same in Manhattan. You have people like at Columbia, it's the stereotypically the post-spectral kind of school too, where we have Georg Haas here. But then you have places like NYU, you have Julia Wolf there, you have places like Mannes School of Music, you have Christopher Serron there, you have Missy Mazzoli there. So there is still sort of that like interesting divide happening, I think even now, than just like 50 years ago when they had the famous like clash between like people like Warren and people like Philip Glass and stuff like that, you know. So you're Lebanese, just like me. I mean, you're like the first. Well, my brothers were here before on talking in this space at least. They're half Lebanese, so you're Lebanese. So it's not going to just be a bunch of Arabs here, but so far that's what it's been. At least with my family, there aren't really any musicians. At least people that are pursuing music professionally or trying to pursue it professionally. How did it end up happening with you, trying to pursue like composing in a professional way?
How did it end up? Well, yeah, I'll say that there are musicians in the family. Like my mom was a pianist, and then gave it up after she graduated college. But my grandpa was also an avid musician up until for his whole life. Although I haven't met him, my maternal grandpa, that is. I kind of started out self-taught. I couldn't get a teacher. I was 12 years old. My parents thought I would give it up immediately. So they just bought me some books, some textbooks, and I learned how to read and write music just by using these textbooks.
Wow.
Yeah, so despite my parents, I'm gonna get a PhD now in music.
But you wanted to do composition from the start at 12, or you wanted to do piano or something first? Or?
Oh no, I wanted to compose.
You're like me then. That's how I was too. Yeah.
I learned how to play piano just to compose.
Wow, that's literally what happened with me too.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
That's interesting. Yeah, because usually I don't hear many people saying that. They say, oh, I picked up the violin or whatever, I was singing in choir, and then eventually composition found. But you wanted to compose from the beginning.
Right.
What made you want to compose just like that?
I don't know. That's hard to tell. That's hard to say because I kind of always wanted to write music, and I always kept putting off the date when I would start getting into music. Then one day at the age of 12, I was like, okay, I really need to get into this now.
So it was just like randomly you were like, okay, let's just do it because I'm getting old. I'm 12.
yeah, exactly. Because remember that moment that you mentioned that like once you read about Mozart and you heard that he started composing at like 4, and you're like, oh, and you were 7, you're like, oh, yeah. I'm already a couple years behind.
Yeah.
I had that same moment at 12. I was like, shoot, I'm like 8 years behind. I'm like,
But did you know anyone else that was composing, or were you aware of anyone living? Because like at least for me, the only people I was aware of that were living composers were people like John Williams or Hans Zimmer, or people that were doing film music. I had no idea there was like this whole world of concert music where you can just like write a string quartet and for no reason except to write a string quartet. Like I had no idea. Did you know at 12 that was a possibility, or did you or not?
Actually, not very much. I didn't know what idiom I was even going to enter between even Arabic and Western music.
Yeah.
I had sort of, I kind of shifted back and forth when I first started getting into music. My parents got me this like Oriental keyboard that you could tune with microtones and stuff.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so you can play like all the maqamat and stuff. So yeah, I didn't even know what idiom I was entering, so I can't say I had like a strong sort of model, like knowing a composer or anything. One specific one. I didn't even know what kind of music I wanted to work in.
So it could have been like strictly Arabic music, like
In a parallel universe, that probably happened, yeah, where I ended up not even getting into Western music.
yeah, but just like learning it by ear or having like a master, like you'll be like an apprentice to someone or something like this, and just going through that trajectory.
Yeah.
What made you want to go down okay, I need to learn Western music theory and go to school for it? Because that's like the opposite of what like the Arabic tradition is. Like recently there's conservatories for Arabic music, but it wasn't like that for 1,000 years. So what made you want to go down that route?
It was actually kind of, there were several things. There was definitely my parents' influence. They told me, all right, go to a good music school. Prove to us that you can get into a good music school. There was definitely a factor of this, of like, you know what, you can do it if you can get into a good music school. And then I told them, well, what music school do you want me to get into? Like, I don't know, somewhere in America or something.
Okay.
Sounds good. Challenge accepted. And yeah, that's how I ended up in Cleveland.
That's so funny. It's like very similar to what happened with me.
Oh yeah.
It had to be like a top 5 school or whatever. Oh, it has to be Harvard. I'm like, Harvard doesn't really have a music program for undergrads. No, okay, then it has to be UCLA. I'm like, well, UCLA is not the only choice. There's others. So yeah, that's pretty funny. Yeah, I mean, it was exactly the same way with me. So you were in Canada, and then you got into CIM, the Cleveland Institute of Music.
Yeah.
And then you studied there for 4 years. Like, what did you think? What was like the biggest thing you got out of studying music composition at school?
Well, let me pick 2 things. I'll pick 2 things. If that's okay.
Okay, 2 things, fine.
Or 1.5 things? No.
Oh, go ahead.
The thing is that I also studied music theory while I was there, and I thought that was extremely beneficial for me personally. It might not be for everyone, but it allowed me to really intellectualize the way I think about my own music, and that I found hugely beneficial. And the other thing is that because I double majored in music theory and composition, the other thing is the great performers that I met and have made connections with and stay friends with.
Yeah, because you went to a conservatory, so there's such a thing as going to like a research institute where there's no performers, but you opted to go to a conservatory for your undergrad where there are all these performers, so you could just like tap on their practice room and be like, hey, can you show me how to do this double stop or something?
Yeah.
So I mean, that I think makes a lot of sense if that's what you wanted to do. You wanted to meet musicians, so that's what you ended up doing. I found it really, I mean, the first time I met your music, heard your music.
Sure, yeah.
I didn't know who the heck you were.
I knew who you were though, by the way.
Oh, you knew?
Oh yeah, like, I don't know if you know this, but like I modeled my whole website on you.
Oh really?
Yeah,
I can't
this
really
looks really
tell.
good.
Well, look, your website looks good.
Well,
but
that's good.
I couldn't tell you copied it.
Okay, good. Now I shouldn't have said anything because now you're gonna go like, let's see, what are you
I copied it from other websites too.
Okay,
so it's that's what the whole thing is. But I found your music. I was doing call for scores, right? I think it was Kaleidoscope Chamber Music, yeah. And well, I have to be honest. The first time, I think at this call for scores, there were like 20 of us, 20 jury members, and we saw all the names of the people and the titles of the pieces. So it wasn't like a blind thing. So when I saw your piece, I didn't know who you were, but I could tell the name was an Arab name. So I have to be honest, when I saw the piece, I kind of woke up, because I'm like sitting there looking at 100 scores, 200 scores, and inevitably you're just not going to listen to more than 10 seconds of something. But then when I got to you, I said, wow, this is the first, Arab name I've come up that I've saw in this huge collection of scores. So it got me, listening more intently than it's just the honest truth. When you're judging a big call for scores, you're not gonna like listen to every piece 10 minutes. It will take you weeks to do it, and you wouldn't be doing anything. Anyway, I saw this piece. I think it was called the Dice. God, I can't remember. It's the Dice. What is it? The
Dice Player. Yeah.
The Dice Player. Thank you. For violin.
For viola.
Viola. I think bass was in it too.
Yeah, viola, cello, and bass.
Viola, cello, and bass. Thank you. Okay. See, it's been a while, but I just remember looking at the score and hearing it and thinking, wow, these are like a lot of things that I'm concerned with too, and I just haven't seen that level of concern with other pieces, obviously, because we have a different background. So what about that piece or any of the other recent pieces you've been working on? How have you been thinking about putting those two things together, the Arabic tradition and all the Western music theory that you've been obviously studied the last 10 plus years?
Well, it's hard to answer, but I try to always sort of go from a genuine place. I was raised with both Western and Arabic music, so I just sort of take the best things, my favorite things from both. I'm also very much interested in how music shapes our perception of time. Mm-hmm. That to me is like probably the most fascinating thing about music. Like when you listen to tarab, like how you could just get into a trance and time just disappears, and Western music can do that too as well. So that's sort of my starting off point. I wouldn't say that I like intentionally try to synthesize Eastern and Arabic music. I just sort of am deeply influenced by Arabic music, and I happen to live in the West.
Yeah.
So, and I have been trained mainly by Western teachers. So I just sort of take what they teach me and see how I can apply it to the music that speaks to me.
Yeah, it's not like a method where you're like literally taking maqamat, you're taking ikat, you're taking like forms, and you're like, all right, let's like figure out how to put like triads in this or something. I mean, that's pretty crude, but I've heard stuff like that done.
For sure, and I have too, of course. Yeah. I do use a lot of the maqamat.
Okay.
I mean, I'm interested in the modes for sure. But I also don't use them in the traditional ways. I don't emphasize the notes that are supposed to be emphasized always. I sometimes stay away from that.
Yeah.
From the typical melodic patterns of Arabic music or Western music in that sense, for that matter as well. So.
There's this idea of, in not just Middle Eastern music, Indian music, Korean music, Chinese music, there's this idea that, once you hear a certain gesture, or once you hear even an instrument playing that gesture, your mind immediately goes to that sound world. It's like what happens. It's like a trope that happens with saxophone players, that they're always like trying to, especially classical saxophone players, they're trying to figure out, all right, how do I make my saxophone not sound like a jazz saxophone? And that has done a lot of, they've gone a long way with that, I think, in the last 50, 60 years or so. But there's this whole idea too, and when we're trying to amalgamate the music that we love, this Arabic music and the Western music, there's this idea that how do I bring in this music, but then not say, oh, this is like not belonging. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes sense, but this idea of like having the music come in, but not have it be so foreign that it kind of takes you out of the musical experience that you're trying to make. And I think you do that really well, because when I listen to it, I know that there are Arabic influences, but if I was like someone that doesn't know that music, I would still be able to enjoy it too. I wouldn't feel like, oh my God, I don't have the knowledge to enjoy this piece of music, which is always like, at least for me, it's a big fear of mine. I don't want someone to come in and be like, oh, I just don't get it. It's like over my head. And I think your music does that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I do want my music to be universally enjoyable, even to people who don't know Arabic music, or even people who don't know music in general. I think there's like a really cool statement by Christopher Hasty that says like basically everyone with a functioning nervous system understands music. It's just they may not know how to talk about it, but they have a good understanding of it.
Yeah, and the idea that like unlike other art forms, you have to sit there and listen to it too. I mean, there's this idea of patience that you need with music that's not really like other art forms. It's funny, like watching stuff on YouTube. Like I watch a lot of podcasts, like long podcasts, and sometimes it takes like half an hour to get into it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to do this different format where I'm trying to do it a way. I would like all the videos to be a comparable length, like 5 to 15 minutes. Because otherwise, you have a random video that's an hour long, and yeah, I don't know if that's good for the channel or not. But anyway, it's not a big deal. I'm just doing this for fun for now. I think it's needed. I think something, not my channel, but I think something like this is needed.
There's definitely a desire for this sort of thing, for channels that talk about new music. I have a desire for more of this stuff.
Yeah, like not just me. There needs to be more. Different perspectives, just like inside, just unveiling the current of what's going on, because most people don't know what this is, and there's so much effort that I see that's being put into these pieces, and a lot of times it's one and done. They have the premiere and then that's it. But like there was so much work that went into that. Even if it's a piece that you don't like, or the audience doesn't like, or the players don't like. I mean, there's something about that experience of writing the piece and then, being alone doing it, having mentors helping you, being in that school system, going, meeting with the musicians, recording the piece. This whole process that like, people are not aware of. Even like our conservatory trained musician friends are not super aware of really what we do. It's always like, oh, that's just the composer. We're always kind of like lowest on the totem pole. When you go to a symphony, like I've been to, when I go to concerts where my pieces are being performed at a symphony, sometimes oftentimes I don't even get a dressing room or anything like this, or there's no special treatment like there are for the guest soloists or the conductor. So I think something like this in general is just needed, just to bring awareness that we are doing something. You just don't see it, and that is being, there all these older masters, Mozart, Beethoven, Haydn. They're just like us in a way. We're just the present version, but we're not being. Not that I'm asking for glorification, but we're not even getting a 1/100th of a percentage point of the glorification that they get. Even the great masters of today, I wouldn't say are getting even 1% of what Beethoven would get. And I don't know. For me, there's something. Get off my rant here for a second, but I'll get off soon. But to me, there's a problem with that, I think, just with the whole ecosystem of creating music. I think there's a big issue with that when the composer is like not even part of the equation of how music gets made in the present day. I think it's a shame. And I think a lot of it is our fault too. I think we have to blame as well for having this tortured composer mindset, like, oh, it's supposed to be like this. We're supposed to not be happy, like we're supposed to act like Beethoven all the time. I mean, it's just, I think it's crazy. I think that needs to change, for so that the next generation of composers, they'll feel comfortable in their own skin. So anyway, that's my little spiel.
It's a good spiel though, and there's a lot of good points there. I'll tell you something. I once attended like a composer's talk. And the composer had actually published an article criticizing certain American orchestras for like not playing enough American music. And he sat there and gave us a speech, told us like what the performer's obligations should be to the music of their time and everything. And I listened to it and I liked it and everything, and I agreed, of course. But I raised my hand and I asked the question. I asked, the question was, what are the composer's obligations to their environment? Because he had told us about the environment's obligations to the composer.
Yeah.
Which, I certainly agree with and sympathize with, right? I think that, I guess, what I am interested in doing as a composer is trying to change the culture, but from my end, right? It's gonna be tough to get the whole environment to change, but you can influence the environment through your behavior. And I think that what you're doing here is wonderful with this podcast and your channel and everything.
Well, that's the thing. I hope that more people do what is being done here. I mean, I haven't been doing it that long, but I hope to keep doing it. But did he have an answer for you, though? Did he have an answer? What is the composer's obligation to the environment? It's a good question, actually, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, he kind of stuttered, was a bit hesitant. I mean, he had to answer. You can't not answer that at that point.
Yeah, especially after he made the opposite claim.
He ended up saying, well, in olden days, Aaron Copland and those types of composers were public figures. Even like Leonard Bernstein, I'd say, did a lot of public service to introduce music to kids, and sort of even had like Shostakovich and Stravinsky as guests when he was running the young people's concerts. And that was the new music of his time. That's not new music anymore, in my opinion. Shostakovich and Stravinsky.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just not new music anymore. Now it's old music.
Now they're the ones that are revered,
yeah,
in that way, or that's canon music. I mean, that music gets played thousands of times a year. I mean, their estates are having no problem.
Exactly. So yeah, basically what he said was something along those lines, like, yeah, maybe the composer should be a public figure, but he's definitely not a public figure, I'm not naming him, so I don't mind saying that he doesn't make an effort to be a public figure. In fact, quite the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, it is harder for a composer to be a public figure, though. It is harder to put yourself out there, and not just to put yourself out there for the sake of it, for being like, oh, yeah, look at my music, because that's not helpful either. But for a musician, at least they have there's some tangible benefit with their presence. They're making music that people are seeing, they're enjoying. Same thing with the conductor as well. With the composer, though, their presence, like their physical presence, is not something tangible to even the musicians oftentimes, because oftentimes I go to a symphony rehearsal and my input is not asked for, which I think is fine because I don't want to waste the rehearsal time. But even if a conductor, I would like at least, which happens a lot actually, it's good. The conductors ask me, even in between the rehearsal, like what I thought, what my input, and we have kind of a back alley talk about what should be improved and what, but it's, for a composer to be a public figure, I mean, I feel like there has to be some other angle. Like, I mean, with Bernstein, at least, you have the young people's concerts, fine. But he was also a conductor. And same, Aaron Copland was also a conductor too. So, I mean, not to the extent of Leonard Bernstein, but still, I mean, he knew how to conduct, and same thing with Stravinsky, he would conduct. So they would find their outlet. Same thing with John Adams, Thomas Otis, they're figuring out, well, I can't do it, I can't be a public figure as a composer, so I'm gonna conduct instead. And these are things that are like being done, but that can't be the only way. Not every composer is gonna want to conduct.
Yeah, and I don't equate being a conductor or performer or anything as being a public figure per se. Not every conductor advocated for music the way that Bernstein did. What I think of it, at least for my applicability, is like just being accessible in general, being approachable. Even if you don't make an effort to be a public figure, at least be easy to approach to musicians, to people. Like, I get people on Instagram who just send me a random message like, hey, I heard your piece, I loved it. Sometimes they want to play it too. Just that, like, that level of approachability, I think, is already something that a lot of composers don't have.
Yeah.
Just being approachable to that extent of like just being on social media, and because sometimes Instagram can allow you to block messages from people who don't follow, or who don't follow you. I don't do that. Anyone can message me, so just that level of approachability is already more than a lot of people of what a lot of people do.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've like emailed a composer or and there's no response or anything like this, and it's like, why? Like, I am genuinely interested in your music, and I want to learn more. I mean, isn't that what every composer dreams of? You know, like having younger people look up to you. I mean, at least for me, that's how I feel. Like my like kind of goal now, I guess, is beyond just writing music. Because I mean, you can write music until the cows come home. I mean, it's an you can just keep doing that, fine. But to make an impact, like what you're saying, and just to be approachable, just that, like, baseline is.
Oh yeah, and I'm not saying
crazy.
that everyone should be a public. Every composer should. Not everyone can do that. Not everyone should do that.
No, of course not.
But being approachable is something that's achievable for everyone, and that because even like a lot of performers who like people's music might be intimidated to approach them, and composers may be intimidated to approach performers as well. So I think just being approachable is already a good baseline.
Yeah, answering emails or DMs as fast as possible, asking them, like, do you need my help with anything? Just anything to make yourself available, especially in these early stages,
and that's
what's needed.
Yeah, and that's something I'm thinking about a lot, actually, because so now that I'm starting my doctoral studies, I have to do a thesis and everything. And I'm thinking about, like, all right, I'm going to write a thesis. Maybe it gets published, maybe it doesn't. But let's say it gets published. It's going to end up on some sort of theory journal, maybe. But, that's not like a great level of accessibility, or even sort of that platform is a very narrow kind of platform. So that's something I'm thinking of, like, how do I share the things that I find exciting with more than just a couple of theory majors who will get into this niche field of musical time that I'm interested in.
Well, it's not just, it's interesting you bring up those little magazines like Spectrum or any of these kind of, because I find that even within these magazines and even with these like conferences, I find that the level of engagement is not like a healthy level of engagement.
No.
Oftentimes, someone raises their hand only because, thank you so much for your presentation. I did a presentation on so that's like related to what you're doing, and I just want to just let you know about that. And I'm like, well, that's not engagement. That's just you like telling everyone in the room what you did after this person's 20 minutes of trying to explain what he or she does. I'm like, it's ridiculous. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that. But what you're saying, to expand it, I mean, it makes sense.
My phone's vibrating.
What is that?
I don't know. I think someone's calling me or something.
No, someone. Who could be calling you during this hour?
I don't know. Could be my parents or something. Who knows? Maybe I'm getting hate mail through the phone or something.
It could be a musician trying to get a hold of you, but you're just like not, you're not being approachable over here.
Well, I also want to be respectful to you, who's in front of my face right now.
No, it's okay. We're just shooting the shit here. But a lot of the stuff you're saying is getting my mind thinking about about our general place as composers, because during the pandemic, especially during the pandemic, obviously, none of us had. We all felt lost. Let's be honest, especially musicians and composers. I don't know how you felt during that time, but at least for me, it was very difficult. I mean, did you find that you were still doing music, or still trying to engage with musicians, still trying to be out there in some way, or did you kind of like phone it in for a year or so?
Oh yeah, no, I did. I kept going. To be completely honest, I was so engaged in my work when the pandemic had started. I don't think that it affected my work in my composing too much, because I was so already. I mean, it made me not write an orchestra piece. That happened. It made me not write for wind, and made me like not write for like winds or brass or anything. but it didn't really break my level of engagement. I don't mean to be insensitive to
That's
a
crazy.
global pandemic. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be insensitive. I know it is a tragedy, of course, but
you were able
yeah.
to keep working on your own things, and you were able to like kind of have that tunnel vision that one needs when they're composing. I mean, that's very impressive. I wasn't able to do that. I like phoned it in for 6 months
the
after
impact
March.
the impact it did have on me was that it's sort of I was looking at screens too much. That probably had shortened my attention span or something.
Yeah.
But it didn't affect my composing too much per se. I mean, I'll also say that especially at the time, I was pretty introverted. By that I mean like the quiet of that the pandemic caused made me feel more energized, and and having too much busyness would have made me feel less energized.
Mm-hmm.
So
what was the piece that you wrote during the last few years that you're most proud of?
Oh, to me personally, the work that I'm most proud of is Orientalism for string quartet.
Mm-hmm.
And next to that, I might say, the thing is, all of my recent pieces have been like major projects that I spent about 6 months on.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing next to that is I also wrote a harp concerto for Juan Riveros, who was an unbelievable harpist, and I'm very proud of that piece as well.
That's an amazing piece, by the way. I just listened to it right before you came.
Oh, thank you, yeah. Well, I have to thank the incredible performers and Juan, of course, for approaching me for that piece, asking me to write it for him and premiering it.
So you wrote the harp concerto during like the lockdown time, or did you know it was going to get played with a big ensemble, or did you just kind of hope that it was going to happen someday?
So here's what I did. It was written during COVID, yes. It was written like during a period of limits on audience members, limits on the number of players we could have at school, all of that. The fact that it was during COVID means that we basically agreed that there'd be no winds, no brass, nothing with where people couldn't have masks on. Actually, the instrumentation for it was decided by me asking my school, what is the maximum number of players I could have?
Interesting.
And so that was the string orchestra, basically.
Very practical.
String and percussion, yeah. And I have to be, I'm fortunate that I was in Cleveland, where they actually, because they're in the Midwest, they're not densely populated. They were able to do more than many other conservatories. Basically, the music kept going, except for like March 2020,
right.
for that semester. But after that, they kept the music going.
Wow.
They were able to do that and still have very few COVID cases.
So even after the 45 days to stop the spread or whatever it was, you guys kept going?
Basically, the next semester, so fall of the next year. Yeah, they formulated a plan of like, okay, first we do just chamber and no classes to minimize, and you have to be masked, so that we minimize the spread. And then we sort of like, so they offset the performance and the classes a little bit. They had just a wonderful plan, and they had to cancel a couple of concerts.
Yeah.
But honestly, I lost no opportunities at school because of COVID. Yeah. So I have to, very grateful for the admin there.
In New York, it was the opposite. Everything, even stuff now is getting canceled,
Oh yeah.
So it's still kind of going on now. Now, if you have one person getting sick, they cancel the show, which is, I don't know if they're doing stuff like that in other fields. I don't know if it's just in the music field, like classical music. I don't know, but those are the stories that I hear, that they would cancel the whole show if even one person caught it, even now.
Yeah. I don't know. I've been fortunate to like never had a case where one of my pieces had been canceled because of someone getting sick right before the performance.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't know.
So what are you working? What's next on your docket?
Next, I have a piccolo and percussion piece I'm writing.
Okay. Whoa. That's a kind of crazy combination.
It is. But it's a piece I'm writing for Mary Kay Fink, who's the Cleveland Orchestra, the piccoloist of the Cleveland Orchestra, and also Dylan Moffat, who plays chamber music with her.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of the main thing. I'm also writing a cello piece for my friend Cecilia,
Mm-hmm.
who's an incredible cellist. There's a couple of other things on the back burner, but I'd say those are the main things I'm up to right now.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's good to have I like to have a couple projects always, at least 2 projects. That's how I work, at least. I have 2 projects that are always going at the same time, and then there's like that third project kind of lurking that you inevitably want to think about more, even though you should be working on the other 2. I don't know if that's how you are, but that's how I am. Always looking to the next thing, even though I have stuff to do now.
Oh no, I have things lined up for later, but just these are what I'm working on right now.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But I mean, do you think about the future stuff? Something like you sit there and think, oh, I should be thinking about my piccolo percussion piece, but I'm thinking about this, I don't know, whatever, clarinet concerto that I'm thinking about a year or 2 years down the road.
Oh yeah, I do that all the time.
That's what I do. Yeah, it's. I think that's good though, because it keeps you excited about the future. You don't want to just like think, okay, I'm writing these pieces now, and I don't know what's going to happen after that. You know, it's not a healthy feeling, I think, for a composer.
Yeah, well, I thrive off of juggling one thing and another with another with another. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sort of always alternating what I'm working on. Like, just always like I'll do some homework, I'll write some music, I'll work on this, work on that, do some errands, get back to music, get back to homework. Just always.
Do you have like a strategy for composing, like a realistic, practical strategy for like when I'm going to sit down and write? Because that's something I'm working on now. Maybe that would surprise you, but I find it's very difficult to like have a schedule for composing. It's always like, I have 3 hours now, I got to do it now. It's never like, okay, 9 a.m. every day. It's always like, okay, I always putting it off.
Oh, you can get 3 hours in a row? That's great. It's pretty hard for me to get 3 hours.
Oh, is it? Yeah, but
to just find 3 hours.
Okay.
I can't say I have a sort of practical thing. My obligations day to day vary.
Yeah.
Between like things I have to do for school, errands, health stuff you might need to take care of. Like you gotta exercise once in a while. You gotta make sure you're not just eating out all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't have a schedule per se, no. And also work is gonna be different every time. Like, so sometimes my composing work is just gonna have to be like, and also I thing is that I do my work like one layer at a time. I'll usually first just write pitches, and then just write, and with their instrumentations, and then just the dynamics, and then just the playing techniques and those combinations, and think about the registers for a little bit and all of that, and then finally maybe rhythms at the end, and then.
Oh wow, you do it that stratified? That's crazy.
I tend to stratify things a lot.
I would go nuts if I did something like that.
And also sometimes part of your work is gonna be like, okay, I have to clean up the score so it's understandable and proofread something. So the kind of work that you have to do as a composer is so varied that it's hard because sometimes I'm like, okay, I can focus now. Let me think long and hard about the pitches.
Yeah.
Or other times like, oh, I cannot think too much right now, but I can definitely like clean up the score, make sure all the symbols are aligned and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, because I guess you're right in that way. Like you can't really predict what you're going to be doing day to day because you might need to clean up the score. You might need to maybe one day you have some emergency that happens at your apartment or something, and you can't get to that, or you have to go to class in college, and that is not a predictable schedule semester to semester either.
And sometimes you're feeling super inspired. You're like, oh, I really should be cleaning up this score because it's due tomorrow. But also I'm feeling so inspired. Let me go write down some melodies and stuff. So it's hard for me to, I don't have a schedule per se, you know.
Yeah.
I have deadlines.
Right, you have the deadlines and then you try to meet them, yeah.
And then I have like, all right, so I'm gonna pull one all-nighter 2 nights before to finish the piece. And then one all-nighter the night before so I can make the parts.
That's something I never do.
Oh,
I never do that.
that is so healthy. I wish I
I've
could.
never done that
You've
once. I've done it once.
I
when
never
was
not
at,
do that.
When I was at USC, that happened to me once, but it was just parts. It wasn't the piece was done. The parts were not done. Yeah.
I will often leave one night to make the parts, the last night to make the parts, and the night before to make the piece, and I'll pull all-nighters on these nights, and also do a final rewriting of the piece just the 2 nights before it's due. Like one final rewriting to get as many things right as I'm able to, as I can think of. Because then, what I'll do is this, I'll write a piece, I'm like, oh, you know what, but the part that I want to be the loudest doesn't work with the register of the voice, maybe because the voice is loudest in the highest register, but that's not the same as the dynamic peak. So I need to make these work so that they work together, so that the music works idiomatically with the voice, for example. Or
so it's like more of like a global look at how was this actually going to sound, like in real life, rather than these are the notes and pitches that I know should happen, that kind of thing.
And at that stage, at the 2 nights before it's due, it's going to be more of like, make sure that all the dynamic peaks, I also think about peaks a lot, all the dynamic peaks are in the right spot.
Yeah.
All the registral peaks, the density peaks, the dissonance peaks, the consonance peaks, the density.
Yeah, I definitely heard a lot of that in your harp concerto. I was very impressed by how well balanced everything was. Like I could always hear the harp really clearly, and it always had like a purpose. It was never like accompanying ever. If I remember correctly, it was always like the focal point. Even when there was a lot of stuff going on, you can really hear that the harp is still central. And I think some of these things you're saying definitely had some sort of effect on that happening, right? I mean, it wasn't by accident that these things happen.
No, and with the harp concerto, you really have to think about making sure. And also, I have to thank Juan, who's the harpist, who just is able to play very loud and project really well. And
of course. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for coming in. I really appreciate it. I think it's like our second or third time meeting in person, but
it's an honor. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you, man. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Of course.
Well, this is Sami Seif. I'll leave his Instagram. He's on Instagram. If you DM him, he's there.
Answer.
He's going to answer. So
even if it's hate mail.
I'll leave his Instagram, and I'll leave his website down in the description below. And check out his music. Check out Orientalism. Check out the harp concerto. Check out the dice player. Check it out. Check all of it out. It's great. Thanks so much, man. Thank you.
Thank you. Of course. Thank you.